In the silence of Babylonian exile, far away from the holy city, a prophet named Ezekiel was given visions that stretched beyond human imagination. Among them was one that has remained both haunting and mysterious, a valley filled with bones, dry and scattered, stretching as far as the eye could see. Ezekiel was led into the valley, not to admire it, but to feel the weight of desolation. These bones were not fresh remains. They were brittle, forgotten, and without hope. They spoke of death that had long reigned and of promises that seemed broken. And then, in that place of silence, a voice came, the voice of the Eternal. "Son of man, can these bones live?" Ezekiel, overwhelmed by the sight, gave the only answer he could. "O Lord God, you know." For who else but God could answer such a question? Who else but God could reverse such finality? Then came the command, "Prophesy over these bones." Imagine the scene. Ezekiel standing among the skeletal remains, lifting his voice to bones that could not hear, declaring life into what was lifeless. And as the words went forth, something happened. The valley shook with the rattling of bones. One by one, bone found bone, skeletons formed, sinews and flesh appeared, and finally breath entered them. They rose to their feet, not as corpses, but as a vast and mighty army. But what did this mean? God himself gave the interpretation. "These bones are the whole house of Israel. They say, 'Our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, we are cut off.' Therefore prophesy and say to them, 'I will open your graves and bring you back to the land of Israel.'" At the simplest level, it was a message of national restoration. Israel, broken and scattered, would live again. And history has borne this out. The people of Israel, exiled by the Babylonians, later returned under Ezra and Nehemiah to rebuild their temple and city. Yet even that was not the full picture. Centuries later, after the destruction by Rome in 70 AD, the Jewish people were scattered again, exiled across the world for nearly 2,000 years. Nations rose and fell, empires ruled and collapsed, but Israel remained a people without a land. To the human eye, they were the dry bones of history, and yet against all odds in 1948, Israel was reborn as a nation. Dry bones stood again. But is that where the prophecy ends? Or is there a deeper layer hidden in these verses? For Ezekiel's vision is not only about a nation restored, but about death itself being undone. Could it be that what he saw was also a glimpse into the end of days, a foreshadowing of the final resurrection? The Bible often operates in patterns, layers of fulfillment. The Exodus foreshadowed salvation. The tabernacle pointed to Christ. The return from exile was a shadow of the greater redemption to come. So too the Valley of Dry Bones may be both a story of Israel and a prophecy of humanity. The God who raises nations also raises the dead. Think about how the New Testament echoes this vision. Jesus himself declared, "The hour is coming when all who are in the graves will hear his voice and come forth." When he raised Lazarus, he demonstrated it on a small scale, calling one man out of his tomb. But the Valley of Dry Bones envisions multitudes, an army awakened by the breath of God. Paul writes of a day when the trumpet will sound and the dead will be raised incorruptible. John, in Revelation, describes the sea and the earth giving up their dead, standing before the throne of God. Ezekiel saw in a vision what the apostles promised in doctrine, that death itself will not have the final word. Notice also the imagery of the breath. In Hebrew, the word used is ruach, the same word for wind, spirit, and breath. It was the breath of God that gave life to Adam in the garden. It was the Spirit of God that hovered over the waters at creation, and it will be that same Spirit that brings life to what was dead. When Ezekiel prophesied to the breath, it was not merely oxygen entering lungs, it was the Spirit of God entering humanity once more. This ties the Valley of Dry Bones not just to resurrection but to Pentecost, when the Spirit fell upon believers like a rushing wind, breathing life into the early church. Now consider this. The bones in the valley did not rise as scattered individuals, but as a great army. Why an army? Why not simply a crowd? Could it be that the resurrection is not only about restoring life, but about restoring purpose, unity, and destiny? Those who rise are not merely survivors. They are soldiers of a kingdom, called to reign with Christ when he establishes his rule on earth. Ezekiel's army may well be the same multitude John saw, clothed in white, standing with the Lamb on Mount Zion. And here's where the prophecy takes a chilling turn. If Ezekiel's vision of bones coming to life was fulfilled in part by Israel's rebirth in 1948, then could that event be the signpost pointing toward the greater resurrection at the end of days? The return of the Jewish people to their land was called impossible, yet it happened. What greater impossibility remains? The resurrection of the dead. If one has been fulfilled before the world's eyes, the other may not be far behind. This raises questions that ripple across time. Are we living in the era between the bones rattling and the final breath? Have we already witnessed the skeletons forming, the rebirth of Israel, while waiting for the Spirit to complete the work? Could the bones be standing, but the full breath of eternity not yet given? And notice the timing. The prophecy speaks of graves opening. Graves are not only for nations, they are for individuals. The graves of the Holocaust, the graves of exiles, the graves of martyrs, all cry out in silence. The valley of dry bones is not just Ezekiel's valley, it is the valley of human history. From the battlefields of war to the cemeteries of forgotten generations, bones lie waiting for the word of the Lord. Even archaeology testifies to this haunting image. Ancient bones discovered in mass graves, in tombs, in ossuaries across Israel, all seem to echo Ezekiel's vision. Archaeologists unearth the dust of history, but prophecy declares that one day these fragments will rise again. The stones may cry out, but so too will the bones. And still, we are left with the question God asked Ezekiel: can these bones live? Do we believe that the impossible can happen? Do we trust that the same power that raised Jesus from the dead will one day call forth all who sleep in the dust? For if Christ has not been raised, Paul says, our faith is in vain. But if he has been raised, then he is the first fruits, and the harvest of resurrection is certain. And so, the valley of dry bones becomes not only a prophecy of Israel's survival, but a mirror of our hope. It tells us that no matter how final death appears, no matter how broken a life or a people may seem, God is able to restore. Israel's return was a miracle. Humanity's resurrection will be the ultimate miracle. The dry bones are a whisper from eternity, telling us that death is not the end, that graves are not permanent, and that the breath of God will have the last word. But what if this vision was only the beginning? What if Ezekiel's prophecy connects to Daniel's visions of the resurrection, to Paul's letters about the last trumpet, and even to John's apocalyptic revelation of the dead rising before the throne? Could all these threads weave together into one grand picture of the end of days? The answer may be more astonishing than we think.